Hello everyone, this is Jasmina, and in this video I'm going to talk about the arranging dragons method. Now, in Feng Shui, dragons are mountains, and that's all they really mean. So people who are trying to sell dragon figurines and telling you to put them in a certain part of your house don't understand what dragons are in Feng Shui. So it won't do you any good, but a real mountain there will. Now, natural mountains, and of course in Feng Shui, mountains, hills, and higher ground have the exact same word in Chinese. So in Feng Shui, it doesn't matter which one you're talking about, it all counts. The higher it is, the stronger it is, but even a slope on the ground gives you some extra energy. Now, they are never harmful, even if they are in an indirect spirit location. Mountains that are in direct spirit locations automatically activate sitting stars in that sector of your flying star chart. We learned that in my video about direct and indirect spirit. Now, we would hope that that star is timely. And of course, the easiest way to have a timely star is to have an activated special formation. And there's 4 that do this, that make all stars become timely for all periods. But if you have that, then you know you're really good, and you don't have to be so concerned about where your mountains are located. And this is why Feng Shui practitioners themselves go out of their way to try to get a house like this. Now, the arranging dragon method taps into a different pathway, and that's why it can activate certain stars in your flying star chart regardless of the location of that mountain. And it can activate the sitting or facing star in that particular sector of your house, or it could even activate your base star or your annual star. And of course, your purple white is part of that. It can activate that too. So it is actually very, very interesting and very powerful. But it's also fairly rare. Now, it is important to know the true north, and you need to make sure that you get this understood. Most of the time it won't make a difference, but sometimes it can make a big difference. So you do have to worry about this. Now, there are special charts that you can use. You can make your own, of course, but it will make it a lot easier to analyze any visible mountains. And you can actually get this for a nominal price at this website, which is my store. Now, if you cannot see a mountain, this method cannot be used. But remember, even small slopes, even the slope of the ground, create small mountains. So most people can use this if they know their topology. The topographic map of their location, they can probably figure this out. Now, this method does not apply to apartments or condos. It's not quite clear, and I think the thing is there has been some research on this, and it doesn't seem to work for apartments or condos. It's a little like the flying stars. When you have an apartment building or a condo building, your flying stars have an effect on your apartment, but it's quite small because whatever energy from that is for the whole building, and you only get a tiny portion of it. Now here, there's an additional thing is, do you see the mountain? And then if certain apartments see it and others don't, how does that work? Basically, this is simply not applied to apartments or condos because it's not clear what happens. So this basically is best applied to a single family home. A duplex is usually okay too, so long as you can see mountains. Now, the energy acquired by having a good arrangement in the arranging mountain methods only applies to visible mountains. And I keep saying this, but this is important. If other buildings block the view of your mountain, you don't get that energy. However, if you can still see part of the mountain, maybe on each side of the building, you get some of that energy. If it blocks the entire mountain, well, then that's it. You don't get anything. Now, this does not apply to water of any type. So this only applies to visible mountains. But you do need a chi mouth to activate or to know how to activate this arranging dragons method. So we do have to identify a chi mouth. Now, the chi mouth does not need to be visible from the house, but the mountain does. So here you must be able to properly identify your nearest significant chi mouth. And I do say significant because it depends on the details what you might have. Now, chi mouths will include lakes and large ponds, basically at least the size of the footprint of your house, so that's going to be fairly large. It could also be the intersection of two rivers or two roads, and that's now accepted in modern day and has been tested out. And it can also include where a downstream bridge crosses a river. Now, if you're talking about rivers, you want a river that flows pretty much all year round. If you have an extreme drought, maybe occasionally it stops flowing, but like 90+% of the time it flows, you usually can use it then. Now, it's nicer if where the two intersections of the two rivers join, that's downstream from you, but it can work either way. And the two roads, you don't have to worry about that too much. Although if you're like midway between two roads, sometimes it's the road that is the intersection that's higher. So sometimes you do have to know that. Now, if you live in a gated community, this kind of goes out the window because most gated communities have a solid wall all the way around the outside of the entire community. And that means that chi can only get in where there's a gate. And in general, it is recognized that your chi mouth will be where your main gate is, because it's usually the biggest one. It's where the visitors come to, register or, call you and be able to come in. And that's because it's the same thing as a main door. It's where visitors come to. Now, that's true unless there happens to be a lake inside your community, and then you can use the lake instead. But not all gated communities have this. If you live in a subdivision that doesn't have a lake or merging rivers, and subdivisions don't have solid walls around the whole place, most houses will use the intersection of the local roads within the subdivision to the busiest road. That's like when you're leaving the subdivision, how do you get out to the rest of the world? Now, many subdivisions do have two entrances, and it's typically the one you use is the one with the busiest road. If they're equally busy, use the one that's closer to your particular house. Now, you can usually just use a satellite view to get what you need, at least for the chi mouth. And you want to measure from the center of your house. Now, this is the house that the center of a house that you've defined by squaring off the house where you actually have the floor plan. So this can be a little tricky if you have a very strange roof overhang, but you should be able to estimate it. If you have a flat roof, you can actually usually see your walls, and that is usually good enough. If you have a pitched roof, you often that ridge of that roof goes down the center of your house, but you have to check that that's true. So it takes a little bit of trickery here. Sometimes you actually have to measure your overhangs and estimate where the center of the house will be from the satellite view, but typically this is not terribly hard. Of course, if you have an L-shaped house, it does get harder. Now, this information here, the angle of the chi mouth from the center of your house, will determine which arranging dragon chart you need to use. And there's one that's clockwise, one that's counterclockwise. They happen to be mirror images of each other, but it depends on what sector things fall into, which one you need to use. So here's an example. Let's say we have a house here, and of course this is a subdivision, so there are a lot of houses, and there may be other roads and everything, but we're interested in where it meets the main road. So this represents a road that actually has a median in the middle. So there's so much traffic, they feel they need a median. So that would mean that this is the chi mouth of this particular house, and actually any house within this, certainly on this road of this subdivision, and other roads that even join it, this will still be the chi mouth. And if this were to go straight across, that is, you could turn either way here, then it would be the center of between the two lanes. But in this case, we're assuming that doesn't happen. So you just simply, and you can usually do this on a satellite map, it's usually not so far away, you just draw from the center of your house out to the center of the chi mouth. And it's actually where these two actually cross, that center, that's right there. And then you need to measure this angle. Now, if you have one of those protractors that has 360 degrees, this is easy. If you don't, the easiest thing to do is measure this angle and subtract that number from 360, and you'll get this number. Now, this is the angle with respect to UTM north. Here's where we need to start being a little concerned about the difference between UTM north and true north. Most of the time, it won't make any difference, and in this particular case, it would not either. But what we need to do is we need to find from this chart which of the two charts do we use, the clockwise or the counterclockwise? Well, here's where 280 is. So we're going to use the counterclockwise, and I want you to remember West 3. This is the location of the chi mouth. Now, you want to align the appropriate chart, either the clockwise or counterclockwise. In our case, it's counterclockwise, with true north. So here's where you have to be a little tricky, but you can do this quite easily. You can place the line between the center of your house and the chi mouth at the correct angle. So let's say, here's an example. The satellite map says 280.6 degrees. And if you go to my website and you get a result from putting in your latitude and longitude of add 3.5 degrees, you're going to line up with 81.7 or 81.9. Sometimes I can't read. But in this case, it's still going to be in the middle of that same sector and won't make any difference. But it's still good to do. If you have anything beyond a degree, it's still good to do. In this particular case, this location has less than 1/10 of 1 degree. So it's irrelevant. So we don't need a correction here because we can't measure this accurately. So this is what a chart will look like. This is the counterclockwise arranging dragon chart. What we are looking for is that your chi mouth has to be in one of the highlighted areas. If you line this up with the UTM north and that line doesn't line up, if it lines up in the white and not this tan color, you've got the wrong chart. So you've done something wrong, you measured wrong. Remember we were West 3? Well, it's right here, no problem. Now the center of your house is where you place the center of this chart. Of course, you'll have to rotate it to the right location, and of course, keeping the normal north is down. I put the chart this way. Now the mountain that we'll be looking at, we're looking at the bigger 30-degree outer sectors. So the inner sector, the inner ring, I should say, that's where you're looking for the chi mouth. The outer ring is where you're looking for the mountain. So they do two different things. Now, the traditional allocation of these numbers, which you can see right there, the positive ones are greedy wolf, huge door, military song, left and right assistant. So that's 1, 2, 6, 8, and 9. And the negative ones are 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, and 7. Now, you might wonder why wealth, and basically continued wealth, is such a negative thing. And I think the real reason is the difference between a broken army mountain and a wealth mountain is sometimes so hard to tell that if you get it wrong, it could have disastrous consequences. So if you think it's a wealth, but it's actually a broken army, you don't want to activate that in general. So I think they just put this here to be on the safe side. Now, of course, way back when Feng Shui was created, this literary song would mean someone who's employed as an artist or a poet or something like this. In general, they didn't live terribly stable lives. Oftentimes they didn't have a house. They moved from place to place. They weren't terribly wealthy. Sometimes they barely got by. So they considered this negative. Whereas if you were in the military, you usually at least had enough to eat. So now the 5 is probably negative because 5 is generally a negative star. But also if you're incorruptible, you basically may be too rigid to take an opportunity and run with it. I think that's why this one is considered negative. And of course, 7, just broken army. You don't want a broken army because then you lose the war. So I think that's how the negative ones come about. However, the modern allocation is quite a bit different. The 3 and the 4 move from the negative to the positive. And that's partly because we're in a different world, a different set of circumstances. So you can use either interpretation. It's really up to you. So here again is that chart. And what we need to do is we need to align this chart to north. And of course, this does some weird things. I'm not quite sure why it's doing what it's doing, but these 2 arrows line up one on top of the other. So it is lined up with UTM north. And so this confirms that our line to the chi mouth is in west 3, which is where we calculated it had to be. So we're good. Now, here's the next step. You have to identify any visible mountains. And of course, remember that also means hills or higher ground. If you don't have any visible mountains, I hope you already realized you don't have to worry about this. But let's say we have a little hill here, and for some reason you can actually see this hill because of something from the satellite, and it's fairly close so that you can still see your house and this hill. And so then you can actually just draw a line from the center of the hill to the center of your house. Now, many cases, mountains, especially large ones, are going to be so far away that when you zoom out to see the mountain, you lose your house in a satellite view because it becomes so tiny you can't see it anymore. There's a way to deal with this, and I'll show you in a short while how to do that. But let's just say we have this now so that we want to know the next step. So what you need to do is determine the sector where that mountain is located and note the associated star in the Arranging Dragons chart. So this is that line. It's in the southeast 1 or 2 sectors, and it has literary song, which is either negative or positive, depending on if you want the traditional or the more modern interpretation. So it could be either one. Now, again, just to remind you, these are the positive ones for everybody. Modern interpretation says these are also okay. And this is generally, definitely, this is not good. And everybody agrees upon that. Now you will see, this is the star we're talking about, right here. That's the number associated with the mountain. So let's say the mountain is too far away, and you can't see the house when you can see the mountain. So we can do this with compass measurements even outside your house. If you're really lucky, you'll be able to see the mountain through a window or a door when you're standing at the center of your house, but many times that's not possible. And it's okay if it's not, because you can use what I'm going to show you. What you need to do is take 2 measurements, and you either need a compass or a compass app on your cell phone. Now, it's not going to give you necessarily the correct directions, but all we're worried about is the difference between two different directions. So one of the measurement you take, now this is you in this pinkish color, standing as close as possible to the center line of the house, from, in this case, between back and front, as close as you can to the center. And if you're lucky, you'll be able to measure that, but otherwise you're going to have to estimate it. And you want to measure perpendicular to this wall here that is parallel to these walls. Measure whatever that is. Note that number. And then you turn and look at the mountain. Now, if you can keep your compass or your cell phone as stationary as possible and just rotate it in one spot, that's a little better. You'll get the most accurate reading. But you're going to still have to line it up. So you're going to still at least have to tilt your head. And the key thing is here is you find the difference between these two numbers. And we're going to transfer that to the center of the house. And so whatever you get here for the difference, you're going to visually, on a sheet of paper, you're going to take that same number and put it here and then draw this line. So you're just transferring this to here. And in this case, we now know where north is with respect to the house. We already determined that, but and you can do that with the facing direction too. I've talked about this in setting up your Chiman chart, but it says 132. So that's right there. It's basic. It's definitely in the same sector. Now, remember, in this case, even if we were off by 3 degrees, we're still going to be in the same sector because the west 3 was for the chi mouth was close enough to the center that it had enough room. It was okay. And you're not going to have 3. You're going to have less than 3 degrees error maximum. So this works out well. Now, so now we know where everything is. What we need to do is determine the shape of the mountain and what type of mountain, what numbers associated with it, that mountain has. So you want to watch this video if you haven't already, because this will tell you how to recognize your mountain. Here's an example. This is a greedy wolf mountain, and this is actually from the video that I just mentioned. So this is a star 1. Now the most powerful combination will occur when the dragon type, which is a mountain type, matches the sector star where that dragon is located or where that mountain is located. We don't have that case here. Here we have a star 1 mountain in a star 4 sector. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or good. It's just not as strong as it could be. But even if it were the same, even if this were 4 and this were 4, you actually still have to look at the stars in at least your flying star chart. And that will tell you whether or not you receive the energy. This energy may be here, but your house might not receive it. And one of the stars in usually your flying star chart has to match either this one or this one. If it does, then you receive that energy. If it doesn't, you don't receive the energy. Now, you might get some with an annual star. That is possible. But that's just a single year, and it only happens once every 9 years. Well, in this case, it's going to happen once every 9 years twice, but it's not as good. It's much better to have a permanent thing. And there is some question on whether or not you even get a signal into the house, even with an annual star. I think you do, but you might not. Now, the facing and sitting stars are the most important ones. The base star is quite a bit less of importance. Now, the base star will tell you future prospects for opportunities. So it does help. It just takes a while for it to happen. The annual star can also be activated, especially if you have any one of these match one of these. Match either the mountain type or the sector location. Now, I would say you want to be a little cautious if what you have is the huge door star and you have the annual 2 in that same sector. And of course, this means you have a 2 also in your house somewhere. Otherwise, it doesn't have a very big signal. But if you have that, it's really, even though the star 2 may not be normally timely, period 9 it will be, but it still gets positively activated when you have these matching. It's just not very strongly activated positively. It's just a little bit on the edgy side. But then you add the annual star 2, which is quite negative. You may wash out any positivity there and might even go a little negative. So you have to be a little cautious depending on what you have. Now, there must still be a mountain in the sector to activate this. So let's say you have a star 4 in the literary star sector. That does not give you anything. You must have a mountain there to activate that sector in the Arranging Dragons rings. Now, you can easily have more than one dragon in view, and if you do, investigate each one separately and see what energies it has. Now, let's do what we have, summarize what we have. Our mountain sector is star 4 in the southeast. Our mountain type is a greedy wolf star. If we had a facing star 1 and a sitting star 6 in the house in that southeast sector, then what happens? Only the star 1 is activated because it has a match here. Not super strongly activated, but activated, and that's a very good star to activate, so that's fantastic. If at all possible, put your home office here. Very, very good. Now, this is in the southeast sector, and right now, southeast is an indirect spirit location, so it wants to see water. But once we reach period 1, for the next 90 years after that, the southeast sector will be a direct spirit location. So then this mountain, this Greedy Wolf Mountain, will activate the sitting star also. And so that will even be better if that happens. But that's still a little over 20 years down the road from where we are right now. Now, if you can have all 3 or possibly 4 numbers being the same, then you're going to have an extremely powerful activation of the Arranging Dragons method. Now, how can that happen to have 4? Well, in the 7-star robbery house, if there's an appropriately shaped mountain in the appropriate sector, you can have 4 identical stars or numbers associated with that. And of course, it's best to have this 7-star robbery be activated and having a mountain in that sector where you have the double stars, because remember that's the key to seeing a 7-star robbery house. You have 2 stars, 2 identical stars, and facing and sitting in one sector of your house. And so that's like a good sign. At least you have a possibility of this, and this is a very powerful formation if you can activate it. Now, it just needs a mountain. It doesn't have to be a specific type of mountain. As long as there's a mountain in that either facing or sitting, that's where your double stars will be. You have activated it. You do also need water to fully activate the formation so that you're activating both the sitting star and the facing star. And that water has to be closer to you than the mountain, which is almost always going to be the case, especially if you have to add physical water, that isn't there. Otherwise, you have to put man-made water in. Well, you just put it in your yard and you're good. Now, if you have an activated special formation, any one of these 4, you will know that whatever star you're activating will be timely and it will positively affect that sector of your house. Now, still, you probably don't want to have the 5 or the 7. You don't want to have one of those stars be that one, because the arranging dragon method says those two are negative things to activate in general. And I would follow that rule. Now, you do not have, if you do not have an activated special formation, that's totally possible. You want to check the timeliness of the star, of where you have an overlap, either in one star can be in 2 places, it could be in 3 places, possibly 4. But if that star is timely, you're good for now. Sometime in the future, it may well become untimely, and then you would have some issues. But if, as long as it's timely, that star is definitely positively activated. You'll bring out the good side of it. If the star is untimely, like right now in period 8, 2 is quite untimely, and it you kind of don't really want to activate that, because right now it still means an illness star. But once we reach period 9 in February, it'll actually become timely. So it's a little bit weird. But if you have an untimely star there, that means you don't have an activated special formation of these special 4 ones. There are a couple others that do some good but don't do everything. Now, that star is still positively activated, but it could become more negative when that identical star enters that same sector. So if you had a star 2 and you didn't have a special formation, it's positively activated, but you add the annual star 2, it probably will wash it, kind of make it basically not be good or bad, kind of neutral. Now, you can use any part of the mountain that's visible. You don't have to have the peak. It really helps when you measure it to use the peak, but it doesn't have to be the peak. Now, if you have a mountain range, it tends to span more than one of the sectors in this Arranging Dragons chart. That can be good sometimes, sometimes it's not good. And also, mountain ranges can have several types of mountains within a single range. So you have to properly identify which mountain is where. So this can take some time, especially if you have to do it with a compass. Now, mountain ranges almost always seem to span several 30-degree sectors, unless they're quite far away. And therefore, you can activate more than one sector of your house with a single mountain range. But sometimes the additional sector may not be so good. You have to look at what is in your particular Arranging Dragons chart. And so if it happens that you are activating where the Broken Army is, or the Incorruptible, that is the 7 or the 5, then that means that that matching star in your house is often negatively activated. I mean, it's activated, but it has negative outcomes. If that is the case, it's best to block that view, the view of that part of the range that's not good, or if it's a single mountain, that mountain, or use this sector of your house for an unimportant room, like a bathroom or storeroom or a laundry room. Now, this is mostly applicable if you do not have one of those 4 best special formations activated. So it depends a little bit. I'd still be a little leery about these 2, but you have to kind of see how it goes. Sometimes this might not be too bad, because you've got other good sectors that may overwhelm this if it's only one negative sector. So, and this happens when you have a lot of mountains surrounding you. So that's basically it. I'd like to thank you for watching. Please feel free to contact me here if you have any questions, or leave a comment. And I have a calculator on my website that can help you convert that UTM to True North. And I have a video about this too. And there's one on the website too. So again, I'd like to thank you for watching.